Hello everybody, once again, Blue Collar and Scholar here for another whiskey video. We got a couple of beautiful drams here that we're going to go through with you guys today. Before I do that, I want to say Happy Family Day to you and yours.
Yes, Happy Family Day.
We're here at the Drummond household. That's our household, and it's a busy one. There's lots of animals and peoples and stuff like that, so if you hear lots of background noise, that's what that is. It's okay. We're not in a studio setting, so it is what it is. We just had a beautiful campfire out in the front yard there, and put a chili on this morning, so we had a nice little cooker chili, and now we're gonna drink some drams to go with the chili.
Finally.
Yeah. So so the first one, Greg brought over from his collection, and it is this one here, and that is a Glen Turret Triple Wood. Not a super common distillery.
No.
In these parts.
But it's one of the oldest operating distilleries in Scotland.
Exactly. That is their claim to fame. It says right on the bottle, Scotland's oldest working distillery.
There may be some controversy about that, but
yeah, I think
we'll go with it.
A few claims that are very similar to that, so we're not really sure. But so it's said, and this is a Highland whiskey, so it comes from
just outside of Crieff, for those of you that know your Scottish locations. That puts it right into Drummond country.
That's right from where the Drummond clan hails, right, for sure, yeah.
In Perthshire.
And this one, like I said, is a triple wood, and it's bottled at 43% ABV. And the triple wood that plays a part in this whiskey, from what we've been able to discern, is ex-bourbon.
One ex-bourbon.
And then there's a American and European sherry seasoned oak. So the difference between that is a lot of whiskeys in the past, when they use sherry casks, as Greg spoke to a little bit in the last video, was because they were shipping sherry to the UK and didn't want to ship the barrels back. Yes. So they started using sherry butts to mature whiskey in.
And that was back in 1800s.
That was back in the 1800s. It became so popular, and sherry became less popular, that it's actually a shortage of sherry casks available to the whiskey manufacturers to use.
And that came as a result of the Spanish Civil War and the Second World War. That's when everything dried up. But at the same time, that's what also opened up the bourbon industry, because they could only use their casks once.
Yes, because the Coopers, smart as they were, built in job security and said, the rule is, and you can only use the cask once to make bourbon. So going back to the sherry, so what happened was there was a shortage of, and there is still currently a shortage of sherry casks that whiskey manufacturers can use to mature the whiskey in. So what they've started doing is seasoning casks with sherry. So they won't actually do a full maturation of sherry in these casks. They'll just pour a bunch of sherry into these casks, whether they be virgin oak. I imagine they're probably virgin oak, and they season the casks. So the time that the sherry spends in those casks will impart a characteristic on there. Yeah. And this is one really good example of that, in my opinion, because on the nose and the palate, in my opinion, there's very, very little sherry influence.
No,
I get a huge ex-bourbon notes on here, which it's amazing whiskey. It's beautiful. I love all the fruitiness and the vanillas and caramels and all that stuff, which is typical of an ex-bourbon cask. But I'm not getting a lot of sherry on the nose or the palate, for that matter. But
have you tried it? Let's try it.
Okay.
So we can talk
I've never tried it before.
Palate. That's right.
As you can see, the ball's almost empty. So there is, I guess, there are some darker fruit notes in there, I guess. But it's really like orchard fruit to me, citrus, caramel, vanilla.
And all of a sudden I just got some pepper.
Yeah.
Long
on the finish.
Yeah.
There's definitely a peppery notes on the finish. Yeah.
Wow.
Like a white pepper.
Or a rye crisp cracker.
Yeah. That's actually a really good note. Really nice whiskey. Again, not one you see a lot of in BC here on the shelf. And where did you get this one, Greg? Do you remember?
No. I've been to a few places, and I'm not sure about this one.
But I would say if I saw it on the shelf, I wouldn't turn it down. I wouldn't disregard it. I think it's a really solid whiskey. Apparently, this is the 2023 release. Apparently, the 2022 release, and up to the 2022 release, it was a 45% ABV. So I'm not sure why they dropped it down 2%, but it would be interesting to maybe do a comparison if we could ever get our hands on something a little bit older. But I also find it interesting they don't have an age statement on it. I don't know how old this whiskey is. It's not like a super complex whiskey. But yeah, no, it's a solid dram for sure. Definitely worth drinking. I'd definitely pour this for somebody who is just sort of getting into whiskey for the first time or exploring whiskey for the first time.
All right. This is great. Glen Turret.
Cheers.
Thank you.
What's next?
Oh dear.
There's something a little bit different. So, as we said, the triple wood was maybe a little more ex-bourbon than anything. This is something completely different. This is a Glenfarclas 105 cask strength. And for those of you that don't know Glenfarclas, they are a 100% sherry whiskey distillery. That's all they do is sherry whiskey.
Still doesn't say whether they season the sherry casks or whether they...
Yeah, I think Glenfarclas actually has their own bodega, or at least a partnership with a bodega in Spain, and I think they actually do get sherry butts still. But yes, one could question and argue how much of that is actual sherry casks, or are they just, again, seasoned. And the same thing when you get like a whiskey that's like a rum cask finish or something like that. It's usually just casks that have been seasoned with rum, not necessarily a fully matured. And there's the noise in the background. Like I said, I got three big dogs, so if the camera doesn't get knocked over, we're doing well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I didn't get to meet Buna.
Yeah, one of them his name's Buna. So,
all right.
Indication of an alcoholic, I guess. So we're gonna pour a little bit of this Glenfarclas cask strength 105. This is one that's fairly readily available in BC liquor stores. They release it every year. And what's special about this is Glenfarclas 105, they were the first ones to do it.
First ones
to do cask strength whiskey.
Right. Cask strength.
Yeah, they were the first ones to release a whiskey at cask strength.
And this one came out originally in 1968, so it's even more impressive that they began with cask strength as far back as then.
So this one's bottled at 60% ABV. There's no age statement. If I had to guess, I would say it's probably like somewhere between 5 and 10 years old.
I did ask Adam, where did the 105 come from? And although he didn't know at the beginning, he has an answer now.
Well, I actually did know it, but it was so far back in my my memory banks. I had to be reminded to.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nice out.
Yeah. So we all go by alcohol by volume as a percentage of alcohol. In this case, 60% ABV. In the States, they also go by what's called proof.
Well, yes.
Yeah, and so that goes back to when they were proofing the alcohol to determine whether it was ready to be drank as alcohol. And so when you drink a bourbon or a whiskey that's 100 proof, that usually translates or converts to roughly 50% ABV. Well, before that
there
was also a British proofing.
Okay.
And so the British proofing was slightly higher.
1.75 rather than double.
Right. And so 105 is the British proof of the cask strength whiskey of this particular whiskey.
Now, the British proof no longer is applicable. I think it was in 1980 where they stopped using that and adopted the alcohol by volume, or the ABV instead.
Right around the same time they probably stopped using gunpowder.
Well, that came a little earlier. You used to throw gunpowder into the whiskey just to see whether or not it had reached the proof.
That's right. If you had a beautiful burning flame, then it was at the ABV that you wanted it to be at. If it blew up on you, it if it
It was
blew up on you,
overproof.
it was too strong.
Yeah.
And if there was no flame, obviously it was dead. But yeah, so that's why it's called Glenfarclas 105. Again, non-age statement. Greg and I, years ago, how many years ago now? We were traveling to Banff, Alberta for the Banff Whiskey Experience.
Yeah.
Because we were invited there to co-host a whiskey tasting with Shelter Point Distillery.
6 years ago.
Was that 6 years ago now?
6 or
Holy
7. No,
moly.
actually, maybe 7 years ago now.
So anyway, we
Yeah.
stopped at a good friend of ours in Calgary by the name of Steve Campbell, and he has always had some pretty amazing whiskeys in his collection, and he was pretty. We were pretty honored for him to share some pretty amazing whiskeys, and one of them was a Glenfarclas 105, but it was an age statement one.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was celebrating an anniversary, like 150th or something like that. But it was a 22-year-old Glenfarclas 105, and that to this day is one of the most special whiskeys I've ever had. I think it was pretty special. But
Now, for those of you that are not familiar with Glenfarclas, this is a Speyside whiskey, and the distillery itself actually goes back to, I think it's 1836. So they've been around for a long time. They've been
it is
very successful.
in my correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's the only one that's still family owned and operated.
The Grant family.
Yes.
Yeah, and that came about, I think, around 1865, and they've held on to it ever since, which is quite remarkable.
Like I said, they're all beautiful sherry bomb whiskeys.
Yeah.
You get these beautiful dark fruits, Christmas cake, spices, all those beautiful notes you get from sherried whiskeys. And Glenfarclas, that's all they do, and they perfect it, and they do it well. They have a whole series of special whiskeys called the family casks, and they're all yeared. Like every release is a different year, so you can collect to your heart's content, and they're all highly collectible and very valuable. But
Anyway, I think it's time
okay,
to raise our glass
indeed.
and to honor Glenfarclas 105 cask strength at 60% ABV.
And here's to, like, again, pioneers in the industry.
Absolutely.
The first ones to grow the whiskey community by presenting it at cask strength. And that's delicious. Does not disappoint. And doesn't even drink like a 60%, in my opinion. It is sprightly. It does have some attitude, but it's not like it's not not approachable.
Yeah. No, this is very good, and it does have a gripping taste, which is expected of a cask strength. But
you know what's really cool about Glenfarclas too, though, is like I said, they were the first ones to do the cask strength. But even to this day, there isn't a lot of whiskeys or a lot of distilleries that have a cask strength whiskey as part of their like core range.
yeah,
And this is something that they do every year, and it's part of their core range. It's a cask strength whiskey. Other distilleries, you can get cask strength whiskeys. It's like their special editions or their limited editions, or sometimes it'll be an independent bottler of that distillery that they'll present at cask strength. So kudos to Glenfarclas for that. I think it's pretty cool to stick your neck out there, put profits and bean counters aside, and just prevent a really cool cask strength whiskey. So.
got a long finish. It, I said earlier it was gripping, but in this case, it's got a presence that I can't quite nail down. I pick up a little bit of that pepper that I also experienced with the Glenturret, but it goes somewhere else. I'm not sure where it goes, but anyway.
Goes down my hatch is where it goes.
Of course.
Yeah. You want to put that one aside? I'll pour you another dram for the last bottle.
Let me pour it to the side right now.
Oh gosh. That, by the way, is for professionals only. I don't recommend that, especially cask strength. You can get what's called a misfire, and then the whole video has to be redone, and then it gets really messy. So
It only happens to young guys or young women, but not to old guys. We have no idea what a misfire is.
All right, the last whiskey of the night, and we're gonna move this one along because I know we're getting to that area where you guys are probably starting to lose interest. But this is another one, as most of you probably already know, one of my favorites.
A classic.
A classic. If anybody has any kind of whiskey collection, I don't think it's complete unless it has one of these on there. And that is the Ardbeg 10-year-old. And yeah, what do I say about Ardbeg 10? Ardbeg, to me, is Islay whiskey, peated. I would say on the border of heavily peated. Some of their expressions are one of the most peated whiskeys that you'll try from a core range, anyway. And Ardbeg 10 is just one of those classic, most well-balanced, well-rounded whiskeys that I've ever had in my entire life.
When we talk about peated whiskeys, I think it was 2009 that Ardbeg came out with the Supernova, which at that time was 100 parts per million, which is way beyond what they would normally be looking at, which is around 35, 40.
Yeah.
So yes, they've reached to the top, although.
But what's nice about Ardbeg, though, it's not all about the peat. Like, it's like,
yeah.
There has been like a peat competition. A lot of whiskeys, especially on Islay, have tried to outdo each other, come up with the most peatiest whiskeys. Like the smokiest, Octomores,
yeah.
peatiest, most in your face, punch in the face, Lafroigs, stuff like that. Much like the craft brewery industry with IPAs. How strong can you make your IPA, and how yeah, anyway.
For those of you that don't know about the distillery, they actually went into in a holding pattern back in 1981, and then around 1997 it was Glenmorangie that bought up Ardbeg.
That's right. It was
and they've held on to it ever since. But one of the more interesting ones for me was in 2011 they sent vials of their new make spirit along with some of the wood from the casks to the International Space Station, and they wanted to know what microgravity how that would impact the vials that they had, which they kept at the International Space Station for 3 years, and then returned with all kinds of new discoveries.
Yep. Ardbeg has definitely developed what I would say cult following, and they've are continuing to release all kinds of weird and wonderful whiskeys. To me, maybe almost to the point where it may be too much and just kind of glaze over when you see a new weird Ardbeg. But it doesn't stop me from wanting to try it because I love it all.
Do you know what
I haven't had an Ardbeg I didn't like.
Do you know what the new 2025 Ardbeg is?
Which one is that? Is that the... No, I don't know.
It's called Eureka. And it was actually put together by the committee, meaning that the committee, they brought 100 of their committee members to Islay, and they... So
when I say cult following, Ardbeg has, like, you can join the Ardbeg committee. Yeah. And it gives you actually access to some pretty special Ardbeg committee releases, too, which are also fantastic. I've had the pleasure of trying a few, but
yeah. The one that launched the International Space Station was actually called the Ardbeg Galileo. And that was in 2012, which was, I think, the year after they actually sent the vials up. So yeah, there's lots of interesting history with Ardbeg, and the 10, brilliant.
Yeah,
beautiful classic.
You just cannot go wrong with it. It has that, like I said, it's the most well-balanced whiskey in my mind. Has the beautiful peat, but not too much. Beautiful sweetness that you don't normally, or you don't really get initially, but when you really start dissecting, it has this beautiful sweetness in the background that is just makes it just such a beautiful dram, and especially for a 10-year-old whiskey. Again, it's bottled 46% ABV. Ardbeg, I don't think doesn't go much below 46, and for that I kudos to them as well.
There is a little story about Ardbeg 10. A number of years ago.
There's a couple.
Well, there are a couple, but there is a story between that Ab and I share. But I can't remember how long ago, but we decided to try this Ardbeg 10
yes.
with cigars that Adam brought.
Yep.
And we had to go to the back 40 to be able to smoke them
Yeah.
for whatever reasons. And we were
We're not
like
allowed to smoke
kids
cigars.
because all of a sudden with the cigar it brought out a sweetness in the Ardbeg
Yeah, all the
10.
peat smoke went away, and it was just this
Really?
beautiful, almost like a liqueur, almost
Yeah.
sweetness to it. It was really cool. It was a really neat experiment, and if you guys are into playing around with stuff like that, try different whiskeys with different cigars. And I don't think every cigar would have the same effect on every whiskey. So
No, I mean there's Delmore that has its cigar malt, but
Yep.
this one was a surprise to
Yep.
both of us because
Absolutely.
it just changed everything.
And the other cool thing that makes our Big Ten near and dear to our hearts is 2 of our casks at Shelter Point Distillery right now, which I'm still trying to get over there to sample. And I will hopefully have that video coming out soon. I just have to, the stars have to align for me to be over there. I was supposed to go over last week when I was over there getting tattoo work done. And because of the
tattoo.
because of this, well, check out my other Instagram account. You'll see my tattoo.
Oh, yeah.
But
Pull up the shirt.
yeah, no, I'm not doing it. But
There's an audience here.
what
too.
we had the freak snowstorm in February, and Shelter Point messaged me and says, "Oh, we can't get our forklift into the warehouse right now because of the snow." So they asked me next time I'm over if we can do it then. So it is coming. I'm going to visit our casks, and 2 of our casks are sitting in Ardbeg cask, which I believe was Ardbeg 10. So again, this is a very special
All right,
whiskey.
all right.
Even more.
I want to know whether the cancellation at Shelter Point is what led you to get the tattoos or not.
Well, I was trying to do like when you live in Powell River, you're pretty isolated with ferries. So whenever you are going over on a ferry
That's
somewhere,
the boat ferry.
yeah,
Yeah.
whenever you are going over to either the island or to the lower mainland, you have to try and line up a bunch of stuff that you can do all at once. And I was gonna go over there, get my tattoo, visit the distillery. The distillery thing didn't happen, but it is what it is. I'll get over there at some point.
I guess thank God for the tattoo then.
Anyway,
I'm not
we're
sure.
we're running on further than I wanted to
Yeah.
again, and I apologize.
Yeah.
But there's some whiskeys for you guys. Happy Family Day
Yes.
from our family to yours.
Woo!